Maryland Department of Health, Developmental Disabilities Administration, Self-Directed Services Training Series, Module 2, the Self-Directed Service Team, updated October 2024. This training module will provide you with an overview of the Self-Directed Services team. This training is a summary with important information on this topic. There is more information and requirements in the Medicaid Waiver Program applications, laws, regulations, guidance, and policies. This version of the training was published in October 2024. The most updated information regarding self-directed services is published in the Self-Directed Services Policy and Manual that can be found on the DDA's website. Additional training modules are available that provide additional information on the topics presented in this overview training module. Self-directed services is a team-based model of support. Each participant has a team of people to support them. The participant is the leader of the team and controls their services and supports. Team members are always chosen by the participant. Some team members are required by the DDA-operated Medicaid waiver programs when a participant chooses the self-directed services model. These include the participant's coordinator of community services and the participant's financial management and counseling service provider. Other team members can include other individuals like family and friends as chosen by the participant, self-directed services providers, including employees, DDA providers, vendors, and contractors hired by the participant. A support broker can also be hired as part of the team if the person chooses or is required to hire one. A support broker is required for participants when a relative, legally responsible individual, representative payee, or legal guardian serves as paid staff. These categories are described later in this presentation. The purpose of a support broker is to reduce conflicts of interest and to make sure staff and services are managed appropriately. Support broker services are also required when a participant designates a representative who is a relative, or when a participant employs any person to provide day-to-day administrative supports. Participants lead their selected team. Participants have several roles, including identifying and working with their team to create their vision in their person-centered plan, making all the decisions on who works for them, including employees and vendors, reviewing and improving all expenses, including timesheets for employees and invoices for vendors and providers. The participant's role also includes interviewing, hiring, training, managing, evaluating, and terminating employees, vendors, and providers, scheduling and attending meetings to review their person-centered plan and their services that they're receiving, and monitoring expenses and the quality of their services. The coordinator of community services helps to make sure that the participant is safe, helps to create the person-centered plan, and helps to make sure that the right services are delivered. They also assist with identifying resources and providers for some services. The coordinator of community services creates the person-centered plan within the LTSS Maryland system. LTSS Maryland is an electronic data management system developed and supported by the Department of Health. For the DDA-operated Medicaid waiver programs, it is used by the DDA, the Coordinator of Community Services, and DDA providers to create, review, and maintain records about eligibility status for services and the participant's person-centered plan, services, and Medicaid funding. The Coordinator of Community Services works to develop the plan with the participant and their team. The Coordinator of Community Services is responsible for helping with the completion of all self-directed services documents, including the Self-Directed Services Budget Sheet, Family as Staff Form, Participant Agreement, Individual and Family-Directed Goods and Services Request, Wage Exception Request, and Family Overtime Requests. The Coordinator of Community Services conducts face-to-face monitoring and follow-up to see if services are being delivered according to the person-centered plan and approved annual budget. The Coordinator of Community Services will meet with the participant in person at least quarterly and more frequently as needed to conduct monitoring activities and follow-up activities. A minimum of quarterly monitoring and follow-up is required. Monitoring activities help to determine if the participant is satisfied with their services, determine if the participant's assessed needs are met, checking especially for too low or too high utilization of the services in the budget, prevent conflict of interests, and emphasize the participant's voice. The Coordinator of Community Services also supports the participant with exploring and coordinating community resources to meet assessed needs and achieve goals. Community resources are support and services available to any member of the community. Community resources are not specific to meeting needs of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. To support a life lived in the community, the participant and their team should continuously explore generic, natural, community, local, and other resources to support the participant in addressing any risk and in meeting their assessed needs and goals. In both the self-directed services and traditional models, the participant chooses a coordination of community services provider in the area where they live. The coordination of community services provider assigns a coordinator of community services to the participant. The participant does not directly choose the person at the coordination of community services provider who works with them. It is important to note that support brokers are not allowed to suggest an individual coordinator of community services or a coordination of community services provider to the participant or any member of the team. Participants may request a new coordinator of community services from their coordination of community services provider at any time, or choose to hire a different coordination of community services provider. The choice of the coordination of community services provider is the participant's. To change providers, the participant should contact their DDA regional office. The financial management and counseling services provider provides accounting and payroll support, including verifying employee, vendors, and provider requirements and certifications. The financial management and counseling services provider conducts all criminal background checks for employees. The financial management and counseling services provider creates an account in their system to support the management of and payment for services from the participant's budget. The financial management and counseling services provider creates accounting and expense reports for the participant and their team to review. The financial management and counseling services provider makes payments to employees, vendors, and providers at the direction of the participant. The financial management and counseling services provider operates a payroll system for the participant's employees and pays for Medicaid waiver services. All participants who self-direct their services must choose which financial management and counseling services provider to use. The DDA has a dedicated web page for financial management and counseling services providers for participants and their teams to review. A link to this dedicated webpage is included on this slide. Each financial management and counseling services provider has information about their services on their website. The three financial management and counseling services providers are GT Independence, Public Partnerships LLC, and the ARC Central Chesapeake Region. Links to the financial management and counseling services providers' websites are included on this slide. It is important to review these websites as new and updated information will also be posted to the DDA and Financial Management and Counseling Services web pages. Once a participant chooses a financial management and counseling services provider, the coordinator of community services must complete the LTSS Maryland FMCS service referral. Details on how the coordinator of community services will complete the LTSS Maryland FMCS service referral are included in another self-directed services training module and are also included in the self-directed services manual. It is important to note that support brokers are not allowed to make recommendations or suggestions about the participant's choice of financial management and counseling services providers. Under the DDA's self-directed services model, there are three types of service providers. Employees are selected and hired by the participant in a full-time or part-time role. Vendors are hired and enter into a contractual agreement with the participant. DDA providers are hired and enter into a contractual agreement with the participant. It is important to note that anyone paid to provide a Medicaid waiver service to a participant, including employees and vendors, is a Medicaid provider. This is because the money they receive to provide services is Medicaid funding. This means that they are under the laws and regulations that govern Medicaid providers in Maryland. Self-directed services providers must initially and continuously meet all required qualifications, training, and certifications. They must provide and maintain documentation and records regarding the services they provide in accordance with applicable Medicaid waiver program requirements, laws, regulations, policies, and guidance. And they must be in compliance with local, state, and federal regulations, policy, and guidance. Employees are hired by the participant and work under the participant's Federal Employer Identification Number. Employees provide the services that they are hired to provide based on the schedule of and at the direction of the participant who is self-directing their services. Employees must complete training and maintain certifications that are both required by the DDA-operated Medicaid waiver program and by their employer. Employees must always complete an initial criminal background check as required by the DDA-operated Medicaid waiver program. Employee pay rates and employee benefits are determined by the participant as the employer within reasonable and customary standards for employees. Employee raises and disciplinary actions, such as terminating an employee, are determined by the participant as the employer. Employees paid to provide a Medicaid waiver service are considered Medicaid providers, subject to all laws and regulations associated with being one. This is because the money they receive to provide services is Medicaid funding. Vendors contract with the participant to provide Medicaid waiver services. Vendors provide the services that they are hired to provide based on the schedule of and at the direction of the participant. Vendors must complete training and maintain certifications that are both required by the DDA-operated Medicaid waiver program and by the participant. Vendors must always complete and provide an initial background check as required by the DDA-operated Medicaid waiver program. Participants, as the employer, may also require subsequent checks, such as on a yearly basis. Vendor pay rates are negotiated between the vendor and the participant within the reasonable and customary standards for vendors. Vendor rate increases are not automatic or required and must be negotiated. Vendor rates must be negotiated within the reasonable and customary standards for the vendors. Vendors paid to provide a waiver service are considered Medicaid providers and are subject to all laws and regulations associated with being one. This is because the money that they receive to provide services is Medicaid funding. Participants may also choose to contract with DDA providers for waiver services. Providers are licensed by the Maryland Department of Health or certified by the DDA. Providers provide the services that they are hired to perform within Medicaid waiver program limits. Services are based on the schedule of and at the direction of the participant who is self-directing their services. Providers must provide their license and certification to the participant and to the participant's financial management and counseling services provider. Providers are responsible for conducting criminal background checks for their staff. Providers must complete training and maintain certifications for their agency and staff that are both required by the DDA-operated Medicaid waiver program and by the participant. Provider rates of payment are agreed between the provider and the participant within the reasonable and customary standards for providers. Provider rate increases are not automatic or required and must be agreed upon by the provider and the participant. Provider rates must be negotiated within the reasonable and customary standards for providers. Licensed and certified providers are Medicaid providers, subject to all laws and regulations associated with being one. Support brokers are an optional service for most participants who self-direct their services. Support brokers provide employer-related mentoring, information, and human resource assistance. This can include providing information about responsibilities as the employer of record and information about Department of Labor and applicable federal, state, and local employment requirements. Support brokers can assist with the development of staff policies, procedures, handbooks, and schedules. Support brokers can mentor and coach the participant on recruitment, advertising, and interviewing when hiring new staff and vendors. Support brokers can be an active member of the participant's team. Anyone who provides paid waiver services to a participant, including support brokers, is a Medicaid provider. This means that they are under the laws and regulations that govern Medicaid providers in Maryland. This is because the money they receive to provide services is Medicaid funding. Both support brokers and coordinators of community services can provide critical support to participants who self-direct their services. Support brokers and coordinators of community services have different roles within the team. This is to make certain to avoid conflicts of interest. The following slides show a matrix of the supports a coordinator of community services and support broker can provide at the direction of the participant. The coordinator of community services can help the participant with identifying goals, needs, and preferences for a person-centered plan, creating a self-directed services budget sheet that includes all approved services from the person-centered plan and meets all Medicaid waiver program standards, submitting the self-directed services budget sheet to the financial management and counseling services provider, choosing employees, providers, and/or vendors to meet the assessed need that are in the person-centered plan. Of these, the support broker can only help the participant with creating the self-directed services budget sheet that includes all approved services from the person-centered plan and meets all Medicaid waiver program standards, and choosing employees, providers, and/or vendors to meet the assessed needs that are in the person-centered plan. If requested by the participant, support brokers can help the participant with all of the following tasks: discussing agreements with all providers, vendors to provide the Medicaid waiver services as applicable, recruiting and interviewing all applicants who will provide Medicaid waiver services, hiring all employees who will provide Medicaid waiver services, managing, supervising, and evaluating all employees, reviewing and approving all employee timesheets and submitting to the financial management and counseling services provider. It is important to note, again, that support brokers must support decisions made by participants. Support brokers do not make decisions for participants. The coordinator of community services can help the participant with reviewing services and the quality of supports, and reviewing financial management and counseling service budget reports and making sure services are being paid in accordance with the person-centered plan. The support broker can help the participant with terminating employees as necessary, reviewing and approving all provider and vendor invoices, and reviewing financial management and counseling services budget reports and making sure services are being paid in accordance with the person-centered plan. The coordinator of community services can help the participant with understanding all rights and responsibilities of self-directed services, understanding and following all employment laws, filing grievances and complaints when necessary, developing an emergency backup plan, recognizing critical incidents related to things that may harm or have harmed the participant, and reporting critical incidents and events as per the DDA's policy on reportable incidents and investigations. Of these, the support broker can help the participant with understanding all rights and responsibilities of self-directed services, understanding and following all employment laws, and recognizing critical incidents and reporting them to their coordinators of community services. It includes information related to hiring a support broker. First, it is important to note that the support broker works at the direction of the participant. The participant decides what services and supports they need from their support broker. Support brokers can be hired by the participant as either an employee or a vendor, and support brokers can be terminated by the participant at any time. Support broker services are optional for some participants. A support broker is required when a participant selects a relative as their designated representative. A support broker is required for participants who hire a relative, legally responsible individual, representative payee, or legal guardian to serve as paid staff. A support broker is also required for participants who hire any person to provide day-to-day administrative supports. These categories are described on the next slide. The purpose of support broker services is to reduce conflicts of interest and to make sure staff and services are managed appropriately. This slide gives more details about when a support broker is required. A support broker must be hired by the participant when a participant hires certain people as staff. They are a relative, which means a natural or adoptive parent, child, stepchild, step-parent, or sibling of the participant. A legally responsible individual, which is a type of person legally required to care for the participant. A representative payee, which means someone who manages a participant's Social Security or supplemental security income benefits. And a legal guardian, which is another type of person legally required to care for the participant. In addition to these categories, when the participant selects a relative as their designated representative or hires anyone to serve as day-to-day administrator, regardless of their relationship to the participant, a support broker must always be hired. All support brokers must complete required training and maintain certification. These include support broker training, first aid and CPR certification, and other trainings and certifications that the participant might require. An initial criminal background check is also required to provide support broker services to participants. Support brokers who are paid as employees must complete an initial background check for every person who employs them. Support brokers who are paid as vendors must share criminal background check results with the participant and with the financial management and counseling services provider. Rates for support broker employees and support broker vendors must be within reasonable and customary standards. This slide and the next slide contain resources related to this module. Summary. Self-directed services is a team-based model of support. Each participant has a team of people to support them in self-direction. The participant is always in control and directs their services and supports. Anyone paid to provide a Medicaid waiver service is considered a Medicaid provider, subject to all laws and regulations associated with being one. This is because the money that they receive to provide services is Medicaid funding. Support broker services are optional for participants in certain circumstances. Support broker services are required when a participant selects a relative as their designated representative. Support broker services are also required when a participant hires a relative, legally responsible individual, representative payee, or legal guardian to serve as paid staff, or any person to provide day-to-day administrative supports. This ends Module 2.